Well, in March 2012, the Deep Sea Challenger submersible successfully dove to the bottom of the Mariana Trench, the world's deepest spot, 7 miles down. The Deep Sea Challenger expedition was the brainchild of film director James Cameron, and he worked very closely with an Australian engineer, Ron Allen, to design and build a one-person submersible that would successfully reach the deepest spot in the world's ocean. My role on the Deep Sea Challenger project was project manager for sub-internal, so I was ultimately responsible for everything that went inside the pilot sphere, and I had a team of 7 or 8 people working on the different systems of the sub, including navigation, sonar, life support systems, communications, and a whole host of other very complicated electronic equipment which all had to work perfectly in order to make sure that the pilot returned safely back to the surface. I was brought onto the Deep Sea Challenger project because of my background as a technical diver, and the life support system inside the submersible had to keep the pilot alive for 50 hours in the unlikely event that the sub had become trapped down at the bottom of the ocean. So I was able to bring technology and know-how from a completely different sphere into the actual Deep Sea Challenger project, and utilise a lot of that information and technology to help keep the pilot alive. Before every dive, we had to go through a 160-point checklist, and that was done with the actual pilot. In the early days, we started off, and I would be the one to do the checklist with my technicians around there, and both Jim and Ron, the pilots, were adamant that the way to properly do this is for the pilot itself to be inside the cockpit during those rather long pre-dive checks. So for 3 or 4 hours sometimes before the dive, Jim would be in the sub, lay back, and I would be at the hatch with my team around me, and collectively 4 or 5 people would go through each point of those 160 checklists, one after one, making sure that everything was working. And what that meant is that if one person missed something, it was bound to be picked up by the second person. If that second person missed it, then the third person would pick it up. One of the things that really impressed me about the actual deep dive was just how prepared the pilots were before each of these dives. Jim would typically turn up to the sub with 4 or 5 pages of precisely typed notes which would describe exactly what he should be doing at every single stage of the dive, from launch through to final recovery. Those notes were carried on board by Jim to be referenced during the dive, but also copies were given to the surface crew. So when we had periods where the sub would be in a communication blackout, where we hadn't heard from the pilot for sometimes 10 or 15 minutes, we could visualize exactly where he was on the dive and could make a very clear decision on whether we thought there was an issue or a problem based on the amount of task loading at that point. So leaving a detailed plan for people who are still on the ground when you leave in an aircraft is essential. The project was a huge success. I mean, we have managed to create a submersible that was able to withstand full ocean depth and continues to be a historic landmark in diving history.